All right. See here. Okay, give folks a second. All right. All right. Since this is recorded, I'll go ahead and jump in. Just wanted to say hello and welcome everybody. Thank them for joining today. We have a great workshop for you today called Building Your Business in Downtown Raleigh from idea to opening. It is designed to provide guidance no matter what stage that you might be in. A few of the topics covered today will include services offered through the Small Business Center, including business counseling, importance of developing a business plan, as well as site selection and the LOI process. And lastly, we'll also include navigating small business loans and setting yourself up for success. And just so everyone here today is aware, today's workshop will be recorded and available on our website a little bit later for you today. We will be hearing from three experts providing insight into each stage of opening a brick and mortar business. Um, we will try to incorporate some of the earlier questions into the programming today, and then there will be time for questions later on at the end of the session. So feel free, anyone that's here today, to drop questions into the chat. Joining us today, we have Todd Lyden, Director of the Small Business Center at Wake Tech, Christina Coffey, Broker and Vice President at Lee and Associates, and lastly, Sharon Moe, Senior Vice President and Market President of North State Bank Downtown Raleigh Branch. Um, and today we're going to have Todd kick us off. If you want to get started whenever you're ready.
Of course, I can't get to my share screen. Hang on. There we go.
You are good.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Todd Lyden. I'm the director of the Small Business Center at Wake Tech Community College. I thought I'd walk through some of the things that we do at Wake Tech that's exclusive to Wake Tech. The first big one you can see straight off our website here, this is just a screenshot, is Launch Wake, which is a program where we work with pretty much over almost every municipality in the county to offer a 10-week cohort-based program to help people get started. We're actually finishing up for the semester right now. They go basically the start of the semester. So the next round will start in August. And generally, they're about split in half. So we usually have about 6 cohorts going at a time. And I know Raleigh is the big one in the fall. So be on the lookout for that one if you're interested in that. But on the other side of the house, the Small Business Center itself, our main thing that we do is offer free business counseling, of course, kind of like SCORE or our counterparts at the SBTDC. We do sit down one on one counseling. I have a handful of part time counselors as well as myself and one other gentleman. And you can see, you can go in and request the counseling. And generally, it is mostly virtual, but we do stuff in person if people need it. Um, but we do it mainly as part of the network of small business centers throughout all the community colleges um, in North Carolina. And so we want to highlight that as well because the other thing we do is offer free training. Many ways just like this. We offer a lot of webinars. I'll show you in just a second. But then we also offer a lot of our own stuff at Wake Tech. And so we've got stuff. We just had a rather large real estate seminar last night at our Beltline campus, but we got a new one on April 8th. So we'll be kicking off April pretty quick. Can't believe it's already here. And so we'll have a lot of, we're trying to do more in-person events because we think that a lot of folks are missing the networking opportunities and the chances to connect with other folks. But again, everything we offer, the counseling as well as the webinars and seminars, are no cost. So for anybody, and even the launch programs are supplemented so that folks, it is a competitive process, but it is no cost as well. So hopefully people can take advantage of that. And if there's something you're looking for, we're more than happy to answer that. So one of the questions was, in terms of initial things that we deal with, our top requests for counseling are pretty much where I could probably start, which comes to, of course, most people, when they come to us, are looking for funding, and that almost always comes in the form of where are the grants. Um, but we usually try to focus on what is it they need the funding for, whether they're in startup or in usually their first or second year. The second big question we usually get is legal questions, and usually that's the formation of an LLC, or in some cases, maybe it's looking at developing contracts, things like that. And then finally, especially this time of year, taxes. That's the big one. We get that all the time, but no more than after the first of the year through around this time, people are looking. We don't actually do the taxes, but we do offer almost every single month a CPA or an accountant providing a webinar or seminar, so there's chances to pick their brain. But we always just encourage folks to make sure you get a tax professional of some sort right out of the gate. It's your best move every single time. And then it almost always comes back to writing a business plan. And that's inevitably, almost all of these come back to developing your business plan. And that's almost ultimately what folks want, is help for that, usually to find funds or to address certain questions as they go forward. But that's usually what our biggest question is for. And I'm going to apologize. I'm out at NC State outside, so if you hear noises, I'll apologize right now. Probably our biggest tip, and I think any banker would probably agree with me, is we usually suggest start with the financials. That's our number one tip, is start with the financials, because writing the verbiage of a business plan, especially with AI right now, is really easy. It's easy to put together, who's the management of the business, how a marketing plan might work, all of those types of things. But what we find is most folks have trouble budgeting and then understanding financial basics. And so we really encourage them to try to start there, especially in startup. But I've got clients that come in after 3-4 years of being in business and still don't have a cash flow and don't have some basics down, so that when they want to go for a loan or any sort of financing, their business plan is going to come up real short. So that's our number one. And I know we had a question on finding customers and competitors, and I wanted to go over two big things that we have as a resource. Well, everybody can access this one. Data Axle is available through NC Live at all libraries. And I know we have a business librarian who's more than happy to help folks out directly. But just to give you an idea, I pulled up, for example, we just had a client who put in for pet supply shop, and we did a search of the different competitors in the area, and then pulled a brand new, these are newer listings from the database of potential competitors. So you can also do this for searches on customers and other folks that are new to the area. I'll go back for a second so you can see some of the other things you can look at there. But this is probably one of the better databases for doing some basic research, and you can, of course, access it through any library in North Carolina. But we do have folks who are more than happy to help you with that. We do help folks pull reports because they oftentimes don't know how to dig into the data, and that's where we can give them a little bit of guidance. And then the other one that we have exclusively, but it's a North Carolina-based company right here out of Raleigh, called Vertical IQ, where we can produce reports. We've paid for access to this industry data, and this is just a screenshot of one of the things, what it looks like. But we can dig in even on local economy issues and pull reports specific to your local industry data. So if that's what you're looking for, we're more than happy to pull either of those types of reports for you, for both customers, competitors, and there's a lot of financials in the Vertical IQ reports. Unfortunately, like many databases, it can only niche down so far. So if you have a really kind of specific type of business, it's kind of tough, but we can usually get you pretty close to get you some ideas. And then I know there was a question about veterans assistance, and we work pretty closely with several because there are quite a few veterans in the area, and we see more and more all the time. And I wanted to highlight three that we tend to recommend, including the last one. National VIP is the Veterans Institute for Procurement, because so many are trying to do that. They have their own training programs and a lot of great resources that I always recommend folks check out, because they do cohort-based training as well. And then Veteran, VETRN, they're also got some really great resources that are easily accessible online. And then the last one is very much like us, based out of uh, Fayetteville State University. There is a VBOC, Veterans Business Outreach Center, funded by the SBA specifically for veterans to provide services just like we do, including education and direct one-on-one counseling. We, in fact, had them up last fall, and we'll probably have them up again in the near future to do some of their training at one of our Wake Tech campuses. So if veterans are interested, we always try to make sure we're making those referrals as well. So I think that was all I had to cover the questions and make sure I don't hog all the time. I'll stop my share and hang back and ready for questions whenever needed.
All right, so if we don't have any initial questions, we can circle back at the end for that, but otherwise, I think we can move on to Christina if you're ready.
Yes, I'm ready. I'll just do a quick introduction. My name is Christina Coffey. I'm a commercial real estate broker with Lee & Associates. I've been working as a commercial broker in Raleigh for over 23 years, mainly focused on retail and helping landlords find tenants and also helping tenants find spaces. So wanted to kind of go through some tips for, inquiring about space, and then just to go through a letter of intent or LOI and go over some of the questions that I get a lot from other from tenants. So first of all, when you start calling around, I do highly recommend working with a broker, an experienced person who knows the market and knows how to get you into a space and how to help you select a space. But if you are calling on a property, I would kind of have some things already in mind, like your concept. You definitely want to have an idea of what you want to open, and be able to talk a little bit about it to the broker. 90% of the time when you call, you're going to talk to a third-party broker who's working for the owner. So they will ask questions about your concept. They'll ask about size. If you don't know, that's okay, but have a general idea of what you want in the space. Do you want just a large open floor plan with a small stock room, an office, and a bathroom? I mean, that's typically around 1,200 square feet. So the broker can guide you if in general what you need. And then have an idea of what area and location that you want to be located. A lot of times people will call me and say, oh, I need 2,500 to 4,000 square feet anywhere in the triangle. And that just makes it a little bit harder to have that wide of a net to search. So maybe start with a certain area like downtown or wherever that you want to be, and then, move out from there if you want to expand. So those are the basic things. A broker might ask you to submit a business plan or a concept plan. This wouldn't be the same business plan you'd submit to the bank. This would be a smaller, just overview. They want to see that, you've thought through your concept, you've thought through, the expenses, what it's going to take from signing the lease to opening the door for business. And they want to see that you've got your funding in place or teed up. You may not have a loan secured, but you've at least been pre-approved for a loan, and that, you can get money to do what you want to do. And Sharon will cover that a little bit next. So, and then a personal financial statement. The landlord or owner just wants to see that, you do have enough money to move forward with your concept. So I wanted to go over the LOI. So once you've toured the space and you like the space, the broker will typically send you a letter of intent. So let me pull that up here. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Okay, perfect. So I highlighted some things that let me make this full. Sorry. Okay. So I just did this for just a generic LOI for a wine shop. So first thing is the entity, and Todd covered this a little bit. Most people, you can sign a lease in your personal name, but most people put this in a business entity, and you want to make sure that you have formed that entity, or definitely form that entity before you sign a lease, because it wouldn't be a legal lease if you didn't have the entity formed and signed on the entity's behalf. So sign it in the entity name. If you have multiple locations, a lot of people have different entities for each location, so they don't commingle the funds and keep them separate. So this one is for 3,800 square feet for a wine shop. So for the retail sale of wine and beer and no other purpose. It would have on-site sales, so that is in here. Lease terms. So typically landlords are looking for a 3, 5, 7, or 10-year lease term. Most of the time they won't go beyond 10 years, but they'll give you options. Typically they'll mirror whatever term that you have. So this one is a 5-year term with a 5-year option. FMV is fair market value. So a lot of landlords, if they give you an option, they won't state the rent. They'll do it at fair market value. So at that time, you usually have a notice period that you have to let the landlord know that you would like to renew your lease and exercise your option. And if you do it within that window, then the landlord will renew you at fair market value. You have to kind of figure out the rent. If it's stated, it would say in there what the rent would be starting in year 6. Turnover date, that's usually when the lease is fully executed. And then you get the keys, and most of the time you want to make sure you've got all your ducks in the row, because as we say, when they turn it over, your clock starts ticking towards this next thing, rent commencement. So this particular space for this proposal is a second generation space that needs quite a bit of work. So there's 6 months until the rent commencement. And so that's free time that you get to work on and upfit the space. Now you want to make sure you have enough time. So for a space that's ready to go, I would make sure that you have, 30 to 60 days to do your cosmetic and to put your stock and to open up for business. If you're going to do things where you have to go get a permit, like if you're adding a bathroom, if you're moving walls, moving electrical, and you're going to need a permit, I would recommend at least 6 months. And then if you're taking a cold dark shell, you're definitely going to probably need 8 to 9 months, if not a year. And a restaurant, I would get at least a year, so you have enough build out time. And that just gives you enough time to go through your architect and your GC and get the plans done, submit those to the town for permits, which can take anywhere from 45 days or more to get on the docket to get your permit. And then you actually want construction time, which, will take 90 days to 120 days to do your construction. So just make sure that the correct timing is in there for the space and your use. So rent, I'd say most rents are running in the $30 a square foot these days. You can find stuff that's less. You can also find rent that's a lot more too. Typically 4% annual increases are 3 to 4 is what is market. And so each year the rent would increase by 3 or 4%. Sales reporting, this is something that's in there for the landlord to gauge how the either the shopping center or their building is doing. And so they ask tenants to report their gross sales in a report. It just can be as, easy as, 50,000 for the month of January. It doesn't have to be like a real specific report, just a number. But that is something that most landlords look for, so they can gauge how their tenants are doing. Percentage rent, this is another one that's gotten pretty common. And so typically it's 4 to 6% over a natural break point. How you figure out your natural break point, you divide the annual rent by whatever the percentage is, 4%, and that would give you your natural break point. So say your break point was 500,000 of annual sales. If you made 600,000, you would pay 4% of that difference, which is $100,000 back to the landlord. That can be negotiated. You can put a cap on it. You can change the percentage, but that is getting pretty common that landlords are expecting that percentage rent. TICAM, taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance. That's operating expenses that the landlord incurs and passes back to the tenant. That is non-negotiable. This particular building, it is estimated at $4.19 per square foot. Those can range anywhere from, I think the lowest I've seen right now is around $3.50 to the highest I've seen is about $17 per square foot over in North Hills. So that is something that you as a tenant need to calculate into your bottom line, but the landlord uses that to cover expenses. So again, it's non-negotiable, but you can put in a cap. So year over year, those expenses don't jump up tremendously. The landlord's work and the tenant's work, you just need to make sure that's clear of who's doing what, how you're getting the space, and what work is going to land on the tenant to do to open up for business. Sometimes the landlord will give tenant improvement allowance. I would recommend that if you're going to ask for a tenant improvement allowance, that you give some sort of description of what you need the tenant improvement allowance for. Instead of just asking for a blind number, I find that landlords are more open to giving that allowance if they know what it's going for. And typically you cannot use that tenant improvement allowance for equipment or things that you're going to take with you if you were to leave. So racks or merchandise, you can't use that for. And it's also reimbursed. Once you've finished, you will submit those expenses to the landlord once you're open for business, and then they'll reimburse you whatever you've agreed upon. This particular space needs a lot of work, so this is a high tenant allowance. I would say for a second generation space, you're probably going to get somewhere in the ballpark of $10 to $15 a square foot. For a cold dark shell that needs everything, it's just the walls and a gravel floor, I would say you probably need closer to $80 to $100 a square foot to finish that out. Security deposit, I get this question a lot of what do I need to put down to secure this? The landlord is typically looking for a security deposit, which is the 1 month's rent and operating costs, so the TICAM. And they want you to pay your first month's rent up front as well, and the expenses. So really you're paying 2 months rent when you sign the lease, one that's held for the term of the lease, and 1 month that is that goes towards your first month's rent. So in this situation, there was 6 months until rent commencement. the tenant really wouldn't be paying again until the 7th month because they prepaid. Personal guarantee, this is also something that is pretty important to landlords, and I see few leases these days that are signed without a personal guarantee. And so that just means that you and your spouse, if you have one, are personally responsible for the lease. And if you need to close, you are responsible for covering that lease amount until a new tenant is secured. There are ways to negotiate this too, that you can put a cap on it or limit it for a certain amount of term. Signage, this is the signage on the building. Again, that's typically paid by the tenant. Some signs are more expensive than others if they're backlit or channel lettering. But you will need to find a sign company who you'll give them the specifics for the space, and then they'll give you a proof that you submit to the landlord for approval. And then brokerage, I covered this. Again, most landlords have an agent, and then I would recommend getting an agent as well. And then letter of intents or proposals are non-binding, but most of the time, if everyone's agreed upon terms and moving to attorney's costs, they want to make sure that you're serious and that you know you're not just wasting their money paying attorney's fees. So that is all I have.
All right. Well, I can jump in from the bank's point of view. I was taking notes when Todd and Christina were speaking because I'm going to go back to some of the things that they said. But my name is Sharon Moe. I'm the market president for Downtown Raleigh, but I have experience throughout the Raleigh area with small business lending. So one of the questions I get a lot is, well, should I go for an SBA loan or should I go for traditional financing? And what really is the difference? And the main difference is probably the most important difference to the borrower is, well, what would I qualify for, right? So the main difference in terms of underwriting is with traditional financing, which is mostly what I do. We look at historical performance. So if you have had a business and you're looking to grow and you can provide 2 years worth of trends of your business, then traditional financing would be the way to go. If you're a startup business and you have no history, SBA underwriting looks at projections and puts a lot of weight on projections. So that would be a better way to go. Now, a caveat to that would be, let's say I have experience managing, I've got a lot of experience and I've made a lot of money, but I haven't ever worked on my own. But I have a lot of backup. I have a partner maybe with an additional source of income. Then we might be able to fit you into traditional financing because we look at the primary source of repayment, which is what your business is going to make, but we also look at the secondary source of repayment, which is what I refer to as like the detour sign. So if the business isn't going exactly the way you hoped it would, or maybe it's slower to take off, how would you refinance? How would you repay the loan? So if you have a secondary source of income, you still might qualify for traditional financing. But in general, for startups, SBA is a better way to go because they really put a lot of weight into your projections, especially if you have experience in the industry. So if you are opening a business that you had previously managed, that's a really good option for SBA. Other differences between traditional financing and SBA financing is, for the most part, there are some exceptions to this, but for the most part, SBA financing is variable rate, which in this environment isn't actually a bad thing because rates are falling. Rates tend to be based on the Wall Street Journal prime rate, which is currently at 7.5%. And there's generally a spread. And I would say that the usual spread over the Wall Street Journal prime rate is 2.75. So you can do the math and see that that's actually a pretty high rate. It's better than a credit card rate, but it is, over 10%. The good news with that is as Wall Street Journal prime falls, so does your interest rate. Where traditional financing tends to be much lower than that. Right now, I think you can find traditional financing anywhere between 6 and 8%, depending upon what the whole package looks like and what you're borrowing for. The traditional loan route is a lot less intensive. I would say we do ask for a lot of information, but whatever we ask for, the SBA will ask for more. You are dealing with a government agency. But that's exactly why it's more, is because, we, the people, are guaranteeing the funds that are being lent to you. So the government wants to make sure that they really look everything over well. As a traditional lender, I also really want to look things over well, and I'm representing my depositors. But it is a little bit less intensive, and our fees tend to be lower than the SBA. But the idea is you go to the SBA when you cannot get traditional financing, so it's worth it. And the other upside to the SBA lending world is that you can refinance. So let's say you're starting up and you're 2 years in, you get your SBA loan, and then you're 2 years in, then you could qualify for traditional financing, and there's not a prepayment penalty in general when you refinance to traditional once you could qualify for that. So I just talked about how cumbersome the loan process could be, and I can get a little specific as to how you can make the loan process move a bit more smoothly. And one way is to be prepared. We are going to ask whether you do SBA financing or traditional financing, we're going to ask for a lot of financial information. And Todd had made reference to the business plan. So whether you're expanding your business or starting it up, we want to know that you've put a lot of thought into how you're going to make money. So I would highly recommend taking advantage of the programs that are offered over at Wake Tech. If you're not comfortable with developing your own business plan, and the financial portion of it is extremely important for our business plan. I think Christina had referenced a business plan that the landlord would want to look at. And that would be the portion of the business plan that has kind of more of the theory and I think that the landlord business plan is the fun part of the business plan. Like, oh, I'm going to have a shop and I'm going to sell this and that and the other thing. We want that too, but we also want to see that you have, researched what your competitors are doing. Is it a reasonable, and we will often compare business plans that are submitted to us by new customers to customers who have gone into the same business, just to see if it's reasonable. And don't be afraid to show that you're going to lose money in the beginning. Honestly, if I see a business plan that shows a loss in the beginning, I'm more willing to look at the loan, because I feel like the borrower is aware. They're in touch with reality. Where if you say, well, I'm going to make $100,000 in my first year because I'm so unique and great, I hope you're right, but I'm not sure if I trust your numbers as much. So a business plan is very important. And like I said, that would be for either a new business, but also if you're expanding, if you're getting a loan to hire more people. I want to see what you think the impact of hiring those new people would have on your top and bottom line. If you're getting a loan to buy a space instead of renting a space, I want to see that you've considered the expenses that maybe you didn't have to consider before, because maybe before the landlord was paying the insurance and the taxes and the heat and that sort of thing. You have to kind of work that in. We're going to need 2 years worth of tax returns for both the business, and like Christina said, the landlord would want a personal guarantee. banks will want a personal guarantee as well. The only time a bank would not need a personal guarantee is if you're a nonprofit, because nobody owns the nonprofit. And as long as the nonprofit can stand on its own, we wouldn't. But on occasion, if a nonprofit has been borderline, we have asked if there's been someone who could guarantee it. And there are two reasons behind us wanting the guarantee. One is financial. It's, like I said, banks always look for that detour, what if, and unfortunately, we tend to have a negative mindset, like, what if this doesn't go the way you want it to? What's our plan B? So the guarantee is the plan B. So know that when you're signing it, especially if you're going in as a silent partner or something like that. We don't evenly go to the guarantors. We go to the guarantor who we think can get us the money. So if, let's say, you and your brother are going into business together, and your brother is the creative one and has come up with this great idea, but you're the one with the deeper pockets, and then your brother blows it, the bank probably is going to go to you because you have the deeper pockets. So it's just something to consider when you're signing documents. What does this really mean? What am I, am I really what am I really on the hook for? The second reason why the bank wants a personal guarantee is it shows that you truly believe in your business. If you're not willing to stand behind your business, why should the bank have trust that you're going to work to pay us back for what we lend you? So that is a big reason why banks want a personal guarantee. So sorry, I kind of got off track, but so we want 2 years business tax returns. We want 2 years personal tax returns from each of the guarantors. And it's possible that those are one and the same. A lot of borrowers have sole proprietorships or sole member LLCs, so they file their business tax returns on their personal tax returns, and that's completely fine. We would want a personal financial statement. You can use the same one that you use for your landlord, basically just to check on what your assets are, going back to our detour and our secondary source of repayment. And then for the business, we would want, if we're applying mid-year, like we would want a year-to-date profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. And we're going to pull credit. We're going to pull your credit report. So just be prepared for that. We could do a pre-qualification without pulling a credit report. We could do a pre-qualification without gathering everything. And pre-qualifications are really good to have in advance. I think Christina mentioned this as well, because then landlords can take you seriously, that at least the bank has looked at you and said, this is the price range where you should be comfortable. But know that a pre-qualification is not a guarantee that you'll get the loan. So if we do a pre-qualification without pulling your credit report based on the historical information that you've given us, and then we pull your credit report and it's much lower than you've indicated it would be, or you have a lot more debt than we thought you did, then that pre-qualification may not result in a loan. So the best thing to do is to be honest with your banker up front, give them as much information as you can so that you get a piece of paper that's worth something, because if you have a pre-qualification that's based on false information, just so that you can get the lease signed, and then you can't get the financing to get done what you need to get done, it's just bad for everybody. It's been a waste of time for everyone, and you might develop a reputation. Let's see. Some questions that had come in before is one of the things is, well, if I want to have multiple businesses, what are some tips for running multiple businesses? And I think, again, Christina touched on one of these things. This is a good idea to have the two separate LLCs. And the main point for that is to not commingle your funds. so that, you have your personal funds are in one bucket, the funds for one business is in another bucket, and the funds for the second business is in another bucket. So you know which businesses are making money, which businesses are being successful, which business is a drain on the other business or not. So that would be my main tip, is just keep everything segregated and separate so that you can track. Somebody asked about what requirements does the state have for establishing a business. And for that, I would, the one thing you have to have is a tax ID number. And then you also need to register with the Secretary of State. And you can go to the website is SOS, like Secretary of State, nc.gov. And there's all sorts of information there about how much it costs to form an LLC versus a corporation versus a partnership, and all of the forms that you need to file. It's usually a couple of $100 to register, and then to keep updated with an annual report. Banks will require, we do a search on the Secretary of State website to make sure that you are legally doing business in the state of North Carolina. And even if you're a sole proprietor or you're registered in another state, let's say I'm incorporated in Delaware, which a lot of people do, but I want to run my business here in North Carolina, you still need to register with the Secretary of State as a foreign business. So just keep that in mind, that you're not incorporated here, but you're registered here so that everybody knows that you're a legit business. Let me see. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking really fast. And so how do you get a loan to open up a store downtown was another question. Again, just going back to finding a bank, understanding what your needs are. Like, I've had people walk in and say, I would like a working capital loan so that I can open up a store downtown. And I'll say, well, how much do you want? And they say, I don't know. What do you think I need? And I'm thinking, well, maybe you don't need to be opening up a store downtown. So maybe, that's where the business plan is really important, and you want to have confidence behind what you're asking for. Also keep in mind that the loan should not be your sole source of funding. I think Todd talked about one of the most important things to understand when you're starting a business is where your funding is coming from, and start from the financial part of the business plan. Again, going back to, why should the bank lend you money if you're not putting your own money in first? If anybody watches Shark Tank, a lot of times the sharks say, like, well, tell me about how much have you put in so far? And it's like, I'm coming here, I want $1 million for a 10% stake. And how much have you put in? And if you watch their faces when they say, oh, I've put in $10,000, like, all the sharks are just like, oh, come on. So it's the same thing with the banks, probably not on the same scale, but we want to hear that you have some skin in the game. And we also might ask for collateral that's outside of your business. Again, because of that detour, we need another way to get repaid. And we want to know that you're serious about this, because if everything is unsecured and you decide you want to try out a business and it doesn't work out and you walk away, what leg does the bank have to stand on to ever get repaid? So I hope that answered your questions, and I'm sure we'll find out in the chat. But that's mostly what I've got.
Awesome, thank you. Perfect. So I just kind of wanted to do a brief reintro. I had introduced myself when I sent out the registration links, but for anybody that might be looking back later at the recording, I joined Downtown Raleigh Alliance last year with economic development. My role specifically is small business program manager. So I personally assist with managing our programs here, includes our workshops like the one today, as well as the storefront upfit grant. Those are two of my priorities, and I also assist with just general storefront tracking, activity in downtown, as well as retail recruitment efforts. So I will help to facilitate those conversations when folks reach out that are interested in retail space. And just general small business support. So feel free to reach out to me anytime. I am primarily storefront facing, but anybody is welcome to reach out to me if you ever have questions or inquiries about downtown Raleigh. I am also a good resource for you. So with that, I just wanted to open up to any questions. Feel free to throw questions in the chat and we can circle back there. So I'll give everybody a moment in case there are any lingering questions.
I have a question for Sharon. On the SBA loans, I know that, how long does that typically take? Because I know the SBA loan won't close without the lease. You don't want to sign a lease unless you have a loan. And what I've been able to do is kind of negotiate kind of a 45-day or 30-day grace period for the landlord, for the tenant to go close the loan and then move forward. But I did have a situation, the last one or two SBA loans that I was involved with, where the tenant had to get an SBA loan, that it took way longer. It took like 6 months. So what is a typical time to get the SBA loan?
So what I'm told is, as I mentioned, the SBA loans tend to be much more document intensive than a traditional loan. And the SBA loan will take as long to close as it takes to collect all the necessary documents. So my recommendation is, when you get that checklist, take it very seriously and get the lender everything that they need at once so that they can look it over right away. There's also a difference in the different banks. It might be something to ask about. Some banks, and I'll just put a little pitch in there for North State, like North State, we can approve our own, as we've been certified by the government, we can approve our own SBA loans up to a certain size without sending it out. So that'll turn around a little faster than the ones that can get it all together and then still have to send it over to the SBA for them to process and approve. But I would say in general, 45 days would be fair. Now, that's what the disclosure, I'm not the SBA lender, but when I am a complainer, so I do complain, like, how come this is taking so long? Because I'm always an advocate for my customer. And the comments I get back is because the customer is taking too long to get us the documents, so then they become outdated. So if their requests, because there's a cutoff, like they need the most recent month's P&L. And if you wait too long, then they don't need that anymore. Now they need the next month. So it's kind of like a vicious circle. So my recommendation, if you're going to work with the SBA, take those checklists very seriously, get everything together, be as organized as possible when you send it in.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Any last minute questions? Last chance. And then everyone who RSVP'd should have my email for any questions later. But otherwise, I think if we don't have any questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up the session. That works for everybody.